As usual, I would like to start my video with a few disclaimers. First, I'd like to make it very clear that I'm a feminist, but I'm a classical feminist, supporting equal rights and opportunities for men and women. I'll make it very clear why I have to say that I'm a classical feminist later in the video. I believe women should have the rights to do whatever they want with their bodies. They can have sex with however many men they want. They can choose to be housewives or career-driven women. And again, they should have the rights to do whatever they want, as long as they are not harming other people. Now that all these things are clear, let's get started with the video. I remember watching a video that was filmed in Canada where men wanted to talk about the injustices that men have to go through. It was an MRA, men's rights activist group, trying to reason with so-called feminists. They talked about women getting custody of the children in an overwhelming number of divorce cases. I'm not aware if he was correct or not, but what I know for sure is that men also have the rights to talk about the injustices that they have to go through. However, there was a red-haired feminist, aptly named Big Red, who was screaming at the man while the man was calm and trying to just have a conversation with Big Red. Another anecdote that I can give you is the example of Julie Bindel, an editor in The Guardian who actually advocated for men to be put in concentration camps so that they are re-educated on feminism. That article has been removed from the internet, obviously. She did mention that she was joking. My point here is, if the word men in Julie Bindel's argument was replaced by any other minority group or women, the internet would have turned into a wildfire, claiming Julie to be a horrible human being, a misogynist, and how she should be fired from her job. You might say, we don't need men for the feminist movement to be successful. And here is where I tell you you're wrong. Men are indispensable if the feminist movement is to be successful. We need dads to encourage their daughters to pursue higher education and postgraduate education. We need husbands to not treat their wives like a baby-making machine, and boyfriends to not mistreat their girlfriends. And finally, we need brothers to support and protect their sisters from their families when their sisters say that they found someone to get married to. So yes, we need men for the feminist movement to succeed. Unfortunately, the disturbing thing is feminist movement has been hijacked by very unhinged individuals to spread their own agenda, and feminists like me are being mocked left and right because the first thing that comes to people's minds when they think of feminists are the same unhinged individuals who can't have a proper conversation with anyone that doesn't share the same opinions as the mainstream feminists do. You might say not a lot of people follow these feminists, but I personally think that these kinds of feminists have more followers because they are the loudest, and later in the video I'll show you how they have also infiltrated academics. So this is my video on how mainstream feminism movement in the West is harming feminism. In the year 2017, women in Iran were protesting against the strict policing that the theocratic government imposes on women, basically forcing them to wear a certain piece of clothing. And if they don't wear that, I did watch a video of a woman being brutally beaten by another woman for not wearing a hijab properly. In retaliation, the government imprisoned those extremely brave women. Not only that, they had to face tons of death threats and rape threats online. According to the BBC, since 2017, more than 35 female protesters were arrested in the capital Tehran alone. The police warned that women who participate in demonstrations against the hijab could face up to 10 years in prison. 10 years for not following clothing protocol designed specifically for women. There's a video put out by Vice where two absolutely brave women are escaping the heavily patriarchal and theocratic government of Saudi Arabia. Their escape is nothing less than courageous, to say the least. In India, a woman is raped every 15 minutes according to Reuters. In India and China, female infanticide is still very much rampant in the rural areas because women are thought not to be able to carry the family name. But the most surprising thing is I haven't heard a single thing from the mainstream feminists about other injustices committed against women in the rest of the world. Other injustices such as policing women's clothing, restricting women from working after marriage, women being deemed as untouchables due to her periods, marital rape, which is legal in India by the way, rape culture in the rest of the world, victim shaming, women being killed because of not being able to provide enough dowry to her husband's family, victim blaming if a woman is raped, and so much more. If a mainstream feminist is watching this video, I'd like to ask you, why aren't you talking about these problems? Is it because these problems are too heavy to deal with, or is it because you don't count these problems as real problems? Let me ask you a question. Do you recognize this woman? I'm sure most of you here said Cardi B. She's an American artist and one of the few female rap artists in Hollywood. Now, do you recognize this woman? If you were able to recognize her, congratulations. If you didn't, let me take a minute to introduce her. Her name is Andrea Ghez, the Nobel Prize winner of physics in the year 2020. She got the Nobel Prize for being able to prove that there is a supermassive black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy. My assumption here is that a lot of women look up to Cardi B as their role model as opposed to women like Andrea Ghez. But why? I believe it's because of the current Western society's obsession with celebrity culture and obsession with being rich and famous. Why look up to celebrities like Cardi B when there are women like Andrea Ghez who are making significant contributions to our understanding of science and the reality around us? I'm not trying to belittle Cardi B at all, because I'm sure she must have worked very hard to reach where she is right now. And her story is a story of an underdog, which is why people follow her. But the existence of celebrities like Cardi B does not make the feminist movement appealing, especially in the eastern part of the world where I am from. Because as opposed to the West, the eastern part of the world is extremely conservative, and we don't really see women objectifying themselves or talking about their genitals as empowering. And my dad in my family constantly brought up women like Andrea Ghez to tell me and my sister that we have to study very hard to be independent. I personally think that one of the biggest things that feminists should advocate is for more women all over the world to be educated. According to the late Christopher Hitchens, the cure for poverty has a name. It's called the empowerment of women. And I think he could not be more correct. The reason why the West is the way it is because of the empowerment of women. On the contrary, let's say in South Asia where I was born, the countries are still struggling because women aren't educated and not empowered. An educated woman is more likely to have less children and to educate her own children. Educated women also lift families and as a result entire countries out of poverty. I will be linking an article in the description box below which talks about this exact thing. From the videos that are trending, especially when it comes to songs, I've seen an increasing trend of women objectifying themselves in their lyrics. Feminists have relentlessly decried the objectification of women from ages, and rightfully so. Neither women nor men should be objectified. What I'm not able to understand is, how is women objectifying their own bodies empowering? When men objectifying women's bodies, it's disgusting and vile, but when women do it to their own bodies, it's empowering, feminist, and brave. I'm really sorry to say this, but a woman objectifying herself and singing about her body parts in a society where you can do whatever you want is definitely not brave and courageous. Courageous are the people who risk their lives to flee an oppressive government like North Korea's. Brave are the women who protested against the strong hijab rule in Iran publicly, despite knowing that they will get jailed for 10 years in prison for doing that. Brave was the woman who wore a skirt in Saudi Arabia despite knowing that she could face dangerous repercussions for doing so. Brave was the woman who went out without a hijab in public in Saudi Arabia and people called for her execution. Execution for not wearing a certain type of clothing. In the West, if you objectify yourself or don't wear a certain piece of clothing, no one will take you to jail. The most that's gonna happen is like people are gonna talk about you, and that's the worst. I think we should really stop throwing the words like brave and courageous around willy-nilly and use it when people actually do something that they might end up risking their lives for. Another growing trend that I observed was the Western radical feminists are increasingly demonizing all men and masculinity as a whole. Julie Bindel is a hardcore feminist working as an editor in The Guardian who once wrote an article about how all men need to be kept in concentration camps. For context, this is what she said. I would actually put them in some sort of camp where they can all drive around in quad bikes or bicycles or white vans. I would give them a choice of vehicles to drive around with, give them no porn, they wouldn't be able to fight, we would have wardens of course. Women who want to be able to see their sons or male loved ones would be able to visit or take them out and bring them back again like a library book. She did clarify that she was joking, which is definitely in her right to do so. But what I find very astounding is if the gender was swapped and if some man was talking about how women should be put in camps unless they learn to behave themselves, it would have caused a massive uproar everywhere. The sad thing is, while in the developing parts of the world, men and women are still peddling the narrative of how women shouldn't wear provocative clothing or else they'll get raped. Radical feminists in the developed countries of the world are talking about men spreading their legs in the train, that is manspreading, or men explaining something to women, that is mansplaining. This was a huge wake-up call to me because I realized how privileged most women in the developed countries are because they only have have things like mansplaining and manspreading to complain about. And me, on the other hand, was warned by my grandma when I was 12 or 13 that I shouldn't expose a lot of my skin in front of guys or else they'll get quote-unquote provoked to do something bad to me. Don't get me wrong, manspreading is a problem when men deliberately try to spread their legs to feel women up, and that has happened to me in the public transportation. But when men try to just spread their legs to make some room for their genitals, which is completely normal, I don't really care. To me, women complaining about men manspreading is tantamount to men asking women to just stand up and move around when women are being tormented by their horrible period cramps. The same with mansplaining. I really don't think that we have to, name a thing mansplaining. If someone explains something to you, why do you make it so gendered? If you're wrong and someone points it out, you have to take accountability for that. In conclusion, no, not all men are toxic. There are some amazing men out there, and there are some shitty men out there, which is the same with women. Some amazing women, some very shitty women. I'm sure most of you remember the movies Captain Marvel and Charlie's Angels. Charlie's Angels released in the year 2020, I think. The common thing in both these movies is the fact that the actresses of both these movies rode the feminism horse to sell their movies. Brie Larson, the actress in Captain Marvel, was constantly demonizing men in the hopes that more people would go to watch her movie. What I found out after watching that movie is Captain Marvel is invincible. She doesn't have to go through any kind of struggle. She just achieves everything without any problem because being a woman, she's just that talented and awesome. When it came to marketing of the movie Charlie's Angels, the director of that movie, I hope you know that she's a woman, Elizabeth Banks, also consistently demonized men. She said things like, "I've been asked to go watch a man's movie my whole life and I'd like to ask the men to return the fucking favor." Of course, I didn't watch that movie, but according to the reviews that I heard, men were constantly being painted as the villain. Women were just perfect in that movie. The men were the ones who were problematic. And here's the problem that I have with Hollywood feigning outrage over social justice. Hollywood elites, who are millionaires and billionaires, by the way, are using the movement of feminism, which is still pretty legit in most parts of the world because we women are not privileged in the rest of the world, to sell their products because being an activist is the new hip thing to do. They're neither investing in a good screenwriter nor investing in any good stories. They just take an expressionless, man-like, perfect woman to sell their movies. What I noticed even further is that the more men-like characteristics a woman has, the better she's perceived. Hollywood is saying feminism is cool and all, but they're constantly making their female leads void of emotion. I think the perfect example to this is Captain Marvel. Despite being widely disliked by most people, it still earned tons of money because it was a part of the MCU. And yes, guilty as charged, I did watch that movie, but I do not consider it to be a part of the MCU because that movie was that terrible. Charlie's Angels, on the other hand, was a massive flop because the director was demonizing half the part of her audience. Wonder Woman, on the other hand, is an excellent example of a movie actually not using gender constantly. It actually humanized Diana Prince. Diana was an amazing female superhero and the story itself was written extremely well. She makes mistakes, what humans and women actually do, and she learns from her mistakes and she moves ahead. She falls in love and loses the person she loved and is distraught because of her loss. She has valid emotions and she's an excellent woman female superhero to look up to. And that movie rightfully earned a lot of money without even having to demonize all men. So Hollywood, take some notes. You don't have to demonize men to sell your movie. Just invest in a good screenwriter, story, whatever. Men and women alike liked that movie, loved that movie, me being one of them. Hollywood is a very hypocritical place because women in Hollywood are strongly against men like Harvey Weinstein, who constantly abused his power and sexually abused and raped a lot of women. But I have no problems with men like Roman Polanski, who drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl. One of those actresses is Meryl Streep, who I think is an amazing actress. She always applauded people whenever they talked about feminism, but at the same time, she gave a standing ovation for the man who was accused of drugging and raping a 13-year-old girl. Hollywood, your hypocrisy is showing. You can take your fake activism and put it exactly where you think I'm gonna ask you to put it. According to The Atlantic, problematic. Believe Women started as a slogan of the hashtag #MeToo movement and has now unfortunately morphed into Believe All Women or automatically Believe Women, which I believe is wrong. Believing all women strips the accused of legal process to defend himself or herself and lets the mob make the verdict. Now, I'm not saying that don't believe women either. I think the best way to approach anything would be to lend women your ears or give them a fair hearing. The reason why I bring this up is because if a woman falsely accuses a man of doing something he never did, the accusation can never be taken back and ruin the life of that man. But if people know that the story shared by the woman was a false accusation, next time women come out with true stories of sexual harassment, people will be very suspicious and fail to give the genuine victim a fair hearing. Women weaponizing the Me Too movement and willy-nilly throwing accusations actually harms the genuine victims of sexual assault. Another dark side of the hashtag Me Too movement has definitely been men being fearful of women in workplaces. In April 2019, a majority of the respondents, 55% men and 47% women, in a Pew Center research survey of 6,251 adults said that the movement has made it harder for men to know how to interact with women in the workplace and to navigate workplace interactions. Sadly, only 28% thought that the movement will lead to more opportunities for women. Furthermore, a study done by the organization Lean In concluded that male managers were now uncomfortable doing common workplace activities with women, such as mentoring, socializing, or even having one-on-one meetings. When men aren't comfortable doing a one-on-one meeting with another woman, she's less likely to get promoted because promotion requires a one-on-one meeting, stated Sheryl Sandberg, the leader of the Lean In organization. I took this from The Guardian, and I do have to say that the conclusion of the article in The Guardian was, it's men's fault. If you won't do anything wrong, then what are you scared of? There are shitty people in both the sides. So there is a probability that a woman can take advantage of that situation and she can accuse the man falsely. I don't know if it happens a lot or less, but even if one man's life is ruined because of the hashtag Me Too movement, it completely taints the movement's main purpose, which is giving a voice or giving an ear to victims and bringing those horrible people under the spotlight and holding them accountable. Here is where I give you some very powerful evidence of how a movement like feminism is being co-opted by something much more sinister. In the year 2018, 3 scholars, Peter Boghossian, James A. Lindsay, and Helen Pluckrose, who are all left-wing academics and atheists, published a paper in one of the reputed journal websites in grievance studies. One paper claimed that dog humping in parks is an evidence of rape culture. I'm not joking here, by the way. This paper about dog humping was honored as excellent scholarship. I'm still not joking. Another paper rewrote a section of Mein Kampf, which was written by Hitler, as intersectional feminism, and it was published. They rewrote a section from Mein Kampf and replaced the words with feminist buzzwords. I will be linking the news articles relating to this in the description box down below. I also watched the talk given by all 3 scholars on YouTube, which I will also be linking in the description box, and I think you should really watch it. They faced a lot of backlash after the editors in those journals realized they were all hoaxes. Referees put in a great deal of time and effort to write meaningful reviews, and the idea that individuals would submit fraudulent academic material violates many ethical and academic norms, said Ms. Gary, a professor of Emerita of Philosophy at California State University, Los Angeles. But what Ms. Gary is failing to mention is the fact that those papers, one of them was copied from Mein Kampf and replaced all of those very toxic words into intersectional feminist buzzwords, and the other one was male dogs humping in parks is a evidence to rape culture. Both these papers, no matter how ridiculous they sound, they both got published. this is what is very, very shocking. The mere fact that those papers got published is itself an evidence to the fact that feminism is being co-opted by something very sinister. These journals did get redacted after the editors found out that these papers had very flimsy research and questionable methodology. According to one of those scholars, this movement has transformed itself into a religion, which I completely agree with, because all of these mainstream feminists ostracize people that hold opinions opposite to the opinions that mainstream feminists hold. The term feminazi is a very apt way to name them because they just can't process the fact that people hold opinions that are not similar to theirs. And here is where I clarify why I'm a classical feminist as opposed to the fourth wave, fifth wave, thousandth wave feminism is what I'd like to call it. It's because feminism has been bastardized into a religion right now, and a very, very puritanical one at that. We usually don't find rational feminists these days. I think I'd rather say we don't find rational feminists portrayed in the media these days. Radical feminists are ready to lynch anyone that speaks against mainstream feminism, and I don't support them at all, which is the reason why I have to say that I'm a classical feminist and not a fourth wave feminist. Classical feminists fought for rights to vote, equal pay in the workplace, and for legal, safe abortion, which I will always support. I'm not saying at all that the West does not have problems that feminism can solve. There definitely are. I've heard horrible stories about women being victims of domestic violence, women having to go through sexual abuse and sexual assault, and so many horrific things that women all over the world go through. However, I'd like to point out a difference between the West and the rest of the world. The difference is the fact that if a man rapes a woman in the West, he's rightfully labeled a rapist and fired from his job, and he faces all kinds of social repercussions, while in the rest of the world, women are blamed for being raped. Why did you go at night? Were you wearing short clothes? Were you in a bar? Why do you have male friends in the first place? Are the few questions amongst many that the victims have to face. One of the examples of a rapist being punished in the West is Brock Turner. Despite his bail from his rich father, is universally despised in the US. If he goes to find a job in any company, he's not gonna get the job because there will be huge backlash against that rapist, joining that company. And rightfully so. I think, these people should be completely ostracized from the society. Rape is a crime in the West, and one of the most despicable crimes at that. A perfect example of rapists in the East is the Nirbhaya rape case, which happened in India. And unlike in the West, the lawyer who defended the rapists actually had the temerity to blame the woman for being outside during nighttime with another man. And that is the same thing that the rapist said as well. One of the rapists said, "You're a grown woman. Why were you outside at night? It was your fault." He couldn't. It's so beyond me that he couldn't understand that he committed a crime. When it comes to my story, I'd like to tell you that I was one of the radicalized feminists, and as a radicalized feminist, I did something's very, very cringy. But I am not a radical feminist right now because I realize that there are different kinds of people, there are different kinds of men, and I realize that demonizing men is not the right way to go, because men will get more desensitized to feminism if they only face radical feminists everywhere. So saying this much, I'd like to tell you that thank you so much for watching this video. Like, subscribe, comment, tell me your thoughts, and I think I'll see you next week or next time. Bye bye.